Hello everyone and welcome to my career mode guide. In this second episode, we will finally be getting a Kerbal off of the ground with the contract Launch Our First Vessel. As this will be our first build to actually fly, we're going to be taking some time to look at some basic tools we have available in the vehicle assembly building. This is going to include a look at the staging diagram and how it works. We're also going to examine aerodynamic drag and how it affects the stability of your rocket, as well as how to adjust the thrust to weight ratio of our craft. Also on the ticket will be a further look at running experiments, this time focusing on whether an experiment is runnable or not. And this being our first flight, we will look at some rocket flight basics, including stability assist, the Navball, and some basic flight controls. Now from our mission last episode, I've already picked up 11.3 science, which is enough to unlock the first 2 tech nodes and give us some more parts to work with. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go into mission control and we're going to take a look at the contract, which I've already picked up. So I'll find that underneath the active tabs. It's going to be Launch Our First Vessel. And let's take a look at the objective. Again, the top part here is color. You can read this if you like. But really what you need to do is concentrate on the objective part, which says to launch your first vessel off of the launch pad or the runway to achieve this goal. And if you achieve the goal, you get a reward of KERBAL science and reputation. As well, of course, if you complete all of the objectives, of which there's only one, you will get further KERBAL science and reputation. And the reason why I'm not going to spend the 11 science that I already have is because it is really easy to do this contract and the previous one in a single mission. And in fact, if this were my own game, I would do both of these 2 contracts at the same time. Combining contracts into single missions is often a very good idea, but I want to keep each of these videos separate from each other, so that's why I'm not doing it here. But if you're playing your own game, instead of doing what I did last video, what you can do is follow this video and get both contracts at the same time. But let's exit out of here, go into the vehicle assembly building, and build ourselves this vehicle. So we're going to start, of course, again with the Mark 1 cockpit because our Kerbal has to go into something. And although this is going to be a very simple vessel, it's a good idea to get in the habit when planning your missions to think backwards. What's the last thing your mission's going to be requiring? And then work your way backwards through the mission to the beginning of your mission. It's just the general way of planning missions, especially as they get more complicated. So what's the last thing our Kerbal's going to be doing? Well, they're going to be splashing down into the water is going to be my plan. So this thing needs to descend safely to the surface after it's left the ground. And if we go down here to the very bottom tab called Utility, there is a part in here, the Mark 16 parachute. That would be a good idea. You don't want to forget that thing. So this is a parachute. And if we take a look down here at the bottom right, there is what's called the staging diagram. Every time you hit the space bar, the next stage will activate. So in this particular case, there's only a single stage, stage 0, and on that single stage is this parachute. So what that means is if I want to activate the parachute, I hit space bar in order to do that. As we enter in more parts, more stages will automatically be added on here, though it is our responsibility to make sure those stages are in the correct order. Let's now think about getting our Kerbals off the ground. Now, if we go over to our second tab, it says fuel tanks, but there isn't anything in there. We don't have any fuel tanks unlocked. So the next tab is engines. We do have the RT-5 Flea solid fuel booster. This is both a combination engine at the very, very bottom here, and fuel, solid fuel in this particular case. So this will make us go up. If we take a look at our staging diagram, notice that this engine has been added to the staging diagram, but right now if I hit the space bar, both of these 2 things are going to go at the same time. I certainly don't want to do that, so what we're going to do is we're going to hit the plus key to add in another stage. We want the engine to go first, and then we want the parachute to go afterwards. So now when I hit the space bar once, the engine will fire, and then the second time I hit the space bar, the parachute will deploy. Alright, so far we got something that'll definitely go up, but I also want something that will go up in a predictable way. So down here at the bottom left are a series of buttons that are very, very useful. I want to draw attention to two of them. This one here, called the Center of Mass Overlay. I'm going to push that button and it puts this great big yellow and black ball. This indicates the center of mass of the vehicle. If you could imagine taking this vehicle and perhaps hanging it, maybe it's just like a giant model. If you hung it from this center of mass point, it would be balanced there. The other one I want to take a look at is the aerodynamic overlay. We'll click that on as well. Now, depending upon what kind of vessel you have, you can think of this as the center of lift or the center of drag, but it's the center of all of the aerodynamic forces on that vehicle. I'm going to refer to this because it's a rocket going up. Aerodynamic forces are going to be trying to hold it back. They're going to be a force of resistance, so this is going to be the center of drag. And if you take a look, the little blue and black ball is actually above, a little bit clipped into, but above the center of mass ball. That's not good. You want the center of drag to be below your center of mass. How do you accomplish that? Well, if we go down here around the middle, we have Aerodynamics tab. We're going to click on that, and inside there we have our basic fins. If you add on a basic fin, that brings the center of drag downwards, right? Like if we see how I can move that center of drag around. I want that center of drag to be as low as I can get it. The further behind the center of mass it is, the better when it comes to rockets. Now, I've also taken the center of drag and dragged it over to one side. So I want to put tail fins kind of all around this thing. Now, you might get into, okay, I guess I'll put one over here, but that gets very, very awkward. You want them all to be symmetrical. Thankfully, the game gives us some tools for that. Going back down here to the bottom left, we have the Cycle Symmetry Count tool. We can click on that, and you can see that it goes now to a 2 symmetry system, a 3 symmetry system. We got 4, we got 6, we got 8, and then it cycles back to 1 again. You can also go through that by pushing the X key on your keyboard rather than clicking with it with the mouse. Both of them will work. So what I want to do is I want to put this on 3-way symmetry. I find this works well for me for this ship. I'm going to grab that part again, and notice now I got 3 of them, and they're all equally symmetric around my rocket, so that my center of drag is still right in the middle of everything. And that's exactly kind of what I want, and it's comfortably behind the center of mass. Remember that as your rocket flies, it's going to be draining fuel, and as it drains fuel, this center of mass is going to move around. If you right-click on our fuel tank, we have some bars here that we can adjust. There is a thrust limiter bar. You can adjust the what the maximum thrust of this thing is going to be. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But below that, we can adjust how much fuel it has. So as this thing flies, it will be draining the fuel. And what I want you to do is, as I drain, watch what's happening with the center of mass. It is going forward. That is good. As long as the center of mass is ahead of the center of drag, this thing's going to fly in a predictable way. When the center of mass drifts below the center of drag, that's when you're going to start to have rockets flipping out on you and all of that kind of thing. So this is a pretty simple rocket. As your rockets get more complicated, especially if you find that your rockets are flipping out on you, that is almost always the reason, is because this center of mass has gone behind your center of drag. Anyway, right now let's get these overlays off. We don't need them anymore. So this thing is most certainly going to be going up, but I also want to collect science. It's not part of the contract requirements, but you're always looking to collect science in this game. That's how you unlock new parts. So we're going to go down here to the science tab, and we still only have our one science experiment in here, the mystery goo containment unit. Let's throw one of these on here. Oh, I still got 3-way symmetry on. Let's take that off for now. We'll just throw on one. But remember last episode we talked about biomes and in situations. When you go to different biomes and go to different situations, you can collect more science. And because this vehicle is actually going to move, we're going to be collecting science, or at least we have the opportunity to collect science in multiple locations. We're going to start on the launch pad. We're then going to be flying through the air. And then we're going to hopefully splash down in the water. That's going to be the plan. So if we think about that, that is 3 locations: launch pad, in the air, in the water. So I would like to run this experiment 3 times in each of those locations. I'm going to go back up here to the tab, and I'm going to right click on here to bring up some more information. And in particular, I want to draw attention to 2 words here: rerunable and resettable. With rerunable, there is an X beside that. That's saying that this experiment is not rerunable. I cannot run this experiment multiple times. However, it is resettable. It is possible to reset the experiment so that you can run it again. However, only scientists are capable of resetting experiments. So I have to make myself a decision. Either I have one of these on here and I put a scientist in there that can reset it, or I have to put on multiple mystery goos. The issue is, if I go to the crew tab and take a look here, my scientist, although he's able to reset experiments, my scientist has limited piloting skills. If I go over here to Jebediah, who is our pilot, let's get him to highlight. There he is, right? Notice that one of his effects is Stability Assist. Stability Assist is a good effect to have. It helps you keep control of your rocket. Jeb has Stability Assist. Our scientist Bob does not. And because this thing's going to be flying, I'm going to want to have a pilot. So I won't be able to reset this experiment. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply put on 3 of them. So I'm just going to put this on 3-way symmetry. I'm pressing the X key. There we go, that's it. So that's one way around not being able to reset things. Just put 3 of them on there, and then you can just run each one separately. This is quite centered on just... Now I'm getting into aesthetics. Let's see, put that there and there. You gotta have things look at least okay. You know, let's turn them this way. Rotate them. By the way, you can rotate these parts by using the WASD keys, and the Q and the E keys can rotate parts around. I'm pushing D actually to flip them like that. We'll do it that way. That looks pretty good to me. Again, don't forget about mass and center of drag. You want that kind of an arrangement there. So there's our experiments. Now we do know there's more experiments that we can do. We learned that we can do a crew report in the capsule. Let's go up to the capsule. Look at that. Right click to bring up this extra bits of information, and we'll scroll on down, and down here it does tell you about the science experiment that it can do. It can do a crew report. Notice that the crew report is rerunable. There's a check beside it. Okay, so the crew report can be run multiple times. You don't have to reset it. It actually is irrelevant what it says here under resettable, because you never have to reset a crew report. That's good. So we can do our crew report in our different situations, in the air, splash down in the water, or on the launch pad. Perfectly good. So now we're getting a vehicle that I think is likely going to work for us. But I want to take a look at one more thing before I launch this. If I go down here to where the engine is, notice there's a number here, 703 meters per second, and we're going to talk about that in detail in a future episode. In fact, it's a very, very important number. But for now, what I want to do is I want to hit this tab, and I want to take a look at one of the other numbers on this list, and the one I'm looking at is this TWR of 6.34. TWR stands for thrust to weight ratio. So let's talk about that. Thrust. Thrust is the force pushing your vehicle along. In this case, we'll be going up, so it's the force pushing it up. Weight is the force of gravity trying to bring your craft down. Thrust to weight ratio is simply those two numbers divided by each other. You take the thrust of the rocket and divide it by the force of gravity on the rocket. It gives you an indication of what that rocket is going to do. If the thrust is more than the weight, then your thrust to weight ratio will be more than 1. And that means your rocket will go up. It's required for you to have a thrust to weight ratio of more than 1 if you want to get off the ground. If the thrust to weight ratio is less than 1, you ain't getting off the ground. It's as simple as that. However, if we take a look at this thrust to weight ratio, it is 6.34. That means the thrust is 6.34 times the weight. This thing will go off the ground, but it will go off the ground like a bat out of hell. It's going to go extremely fast. Now, That could be fun. It also could mean you might lose control of your rocket. It also could mean your rocket might explode. It is a good habit to want to check this thrust to weight ratio, particularly at launch, and make sure that it is above 1, but also that it's not crazily above 1. Myself personally, I like to see this thrust to weight ratio to be about 1.33. Now, how can we control that? One of the things with a, let me get the tab here, this engine, this is a solid fuel booster, is that a solid fuel booster, you don't have any throttle control. Also, once you turn it on, if we go over here to the orange part, you will see that it cannot be shut down. So once you light this candle, it's going to be going up until it runs out of fuel. That's about it. So I don't have throttle control with a solid fuel booster, but I can control the throttle here by right-clicking on this and adjusting this throttle limiter. If I start bringing that throttle limiter down and I take a look at my thrust to weight ratio, notice now it's at 3.55. That's more than where I want it to be. I like it to be, personally, around 1.3. That's actually a very typical thrust to weight ratio for crewed vessels at launch. So I'm going to go and keep kind of playing with this. It's now about, oh, now it's 1.33. I find that perfect. That's the pedantic side of me coming through, wanting to get 1.33, but anything in that range would be fine. If you're having trouble with the bar, sliding it back and forth, it's a little bit, you're finding not getting the fine control, hit the little hashtag button here, and now you can actually put in numbers, so you can just actually type in, well, what's it at 20? What's it at 20.5? You can start playing with these numbers. I found 21 worked really well, so I'm going to put it back at 21. And then I can take that off again. So that gives me a thrust to weight ratio of 1.33. I like that very, very much. So what we got now is a vessel that is very much going to work for us. It's got an appropriate thrust to weight ratio. We've checked the center of mass and the center of drag and made sure that the center of drag is below the center of mass. And we've also made sure that we have a parachute on here so our Kerbal can safely return back to the surface. Let's perform the mission. So here we are on the launch pad, and down here is our nav ball. This nav ball is very, very important for you to keep your eye on. We have two little toggles here, RCS and SAS. RCS does nothing because we don't have an RCS system. More on that later. But we do have SAS. This is Stability Assist System, and it allows you to have more control of your rocket. It tries to hold the rocket to its current heading, which in this case is straight up. Because Jebediah is a pilot, he has SAS capability. If I had put Bob in here, or Bill, our engineer, then I wouldn't have this ability to hold on to a particular orientation. That's why I chose the pilot in Jebediah. You can also, by the way, toggle SAS by hitting T on your keyboard. That turns it on and off as well. So we're going to put SAS on. Now, once I hit the space bar, this thing is going to go, but there's something else I want to take care of first. Once I'm off the ground, I want to do another mystery goo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this other mystery goo, and I'm going to just pin it. Use a little pin thing and pin it over here. So while I'm flying, I don't have to fumble for where the mystery goo is. I know it's right here, and I can just hit Observe Mystery Goo. Same thing as once we're off the ground, I'm going to want to do a crew report. So I will pin that menu over here to the far right here, so I'm ready to do a crew report. One last thing before we get started is looking at the nav ball. I want to go towards the water, which you can't see, but it is in this direction towards the east. Looking at our nav ball, notice north is at the bottom. That has to do with the orientation of the craft. The top of the craft is actually pointing south, so that's why north on the nav ball is down. But 90 degrees is east, 180 degrees is south, and 270 degrees is west. I want to go towards the east, so I'm going to want to move my craft in this direction. This little bird icon indicates your craft. So I'm going to want to move this towards the right. I do that by pressing the D key. So once I've launched and picked up some speed, I'm going to be hitting D to start moving towards the east so that I'll splash on into the water. Okay, other than that, this is ready to go. So I just move the camera out here a little bit, and we're going to hit the space bar. And we are off. And for the first little bit of any launch, you definitely want to go straight up. Just for a little while until you've picked up some speed. That helps the craft be more stable, but I don't know, I'm around 50 meters per second. I'm going to start banging this over to the right here a little bit. And because we built ourselves a nice stable craft, I can actually toggle off the SAS, and this thing will want to just follow this prograde vector. This is when you build a stable craft. This is the kind of thing that you get. Now, I am going to do a mystery goo. And I get a mystery goo. The goo jiggles and wobbles as the craft flies, but we are observing flying at Kerbin. So that means that now that I've done the flying at Kerbin bit of it, there's no more mystery goo for us to do flying at Kerbin. Actually, there is a little bit because we didn't get all of it, did we? We can do a crew report. And the crew report says that the shores look inviting. This is crew report flying over Kerbin's shores, which says if I'm flying over other things, I can do other crew reports. Oh, that's good. But right now, we're going to grab that 3.5 science. Notice that we've run out of fuel, and we are on our way down. We're going to hit the water at some velocity, so this would be a good time for us to hit spacebar again and deploy that parachute. Now, the parachute starts in a reefed position, so there's not a whole lot of drag associated with this, but once our speed has come down to something a little bit more sane, actually it's when the atmosphere gets a little bit thicker. At a certain altitude, it should fully deploy, and we should look not quite so scary. There it goes. And now with all of that drag, this thing flips around into an orientation that's a lot more comfortable. All right, and our speed has come down so that we won't hit the water at a super high velocity, but let's get down there. I'm going to use a little bit of time warping. I'm just hitting the plus button. Plus key. Oh, and there we are in the water. We broke off our tail fins, but that actually doesn't really matter. I'm going to put on my SAS again, and I'm just going to roll the craft using the E and W keys so that our hatch is up. All right, so we still have a mystery goo to do, so we're going to do that last mystery goo. Observe the mystery goo. And it says now we're doing a mystery goo from Kerbin's water. Again, 4 more science for us. That is awesome. Grab that. And then I also want to do a crew report. We're now in a new situation. But if I click on the crew report, notice that, whoa, a crew report already exists. Remember, we already did a crew report. So if I do this crew report, I'll overwrite the other crew report. I don't want to do that. So how do I deal with that situation? I'm going to hit cancel, first of all. It's actually really, really easy. Jebediah is going to go out, just like that. And remember that we have the ability to take experiments out. So notice that there is data stored in here. There's one data stored in here. We're going to take that data, so that data is now with Jebediah. Any Kerbal can take data. It doesn't have to be a scientist. And then we're going to store that experiment back into it. And it looks like I didn't do anything, but what I did do is I moved the crew report from the actual experiment to being stored just generally in the capsule. That will free the crew report. So if I board again and now do another crew report, notice that now it's letting me doing a crew report from the water without overwriting the other one. So you can keep doing as many crew reports as you want. Just remember that what you need to do is take the old crew report, take it out, and then store it back in to free up being able to do another crew report. It is a little bit confusing, I will admit to that, but it's what you need to do. It's the way the game is set up. Okay, and Jebediah, by the way, can also do an EVA report. That is another 3.2 science, so there we go. We're going to grab that. And with that, there was nothing left to do. Upon recovery, I had 45.7 science to spend in the Research and Development Center, and while I'm unlocking tech nodes, why don't we go over the main takeaways from this episode? We looked at the importance of managing the staging diagram. Always remember to check your staging, as the game will often put things in funny orders. We spent most of our time talking about how to design a stable rocket that is easy to fly. The two main ideas being to use fins to adjust the position of the center of drag so that it is well behind the center of mass, and to set your launch thrust-to-weight ratio by tweaking the thrust limiter of the engine. A Launch TWR of about 1.35 works well for me, though you are free to try out different values. Finally, we talked about how some experiments, like the mystery goo, cannot be rerun without a scientist, but regardless of the experiment, the data from a previous experiment must always be removed before the experiment can be run again. That brings this episode to a close. Make sure to join us next week when we will be putting our first Kerbal into space. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you then.